Welcome to the Private Equity Experience Podcast, your backstage pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets that drive value in the PE universe. No filters, no fluff, just straight talk and expert insights to help you navigate the private equity world with confidence. And now your hosts, Ed Barton, Rory Liebhart, and Emily Sander.
All right. To get us into our topic today, quick trivia round for you, Ed and Rory.
Here we go again.
First one. In the Justice League, which hero once outran Superman in a race?
Oh my God.
It's got to be Flash. Gordon,
The Flash.
The Flash.
Yeah,
Question
I
two,
guess as well,
what's the
but-
portable storage device you carry on a keychain?
That's a tough one.
A flash drive.
Flash drive. Last one.
Does
What is
anybody
the
carry those
momentary
anymore? Oh.
burst in a pan before a flambe?
I'm going 0 for 3 on this, I guarantee you. The burst.
There's a saying. It was a,
Flash in the pan?
there we go. Rory,
wow.
you got the
That was-
last one.
Oh, the
Flash
dark.
pan.
I thought it had to be
Yeah,
Whoa.
dark
something way
word.
more clever than that.
Oh my gosh, very good. Speaking of flashes, that's what
Boom.
we're here to talk about. The Flash Report. The Flash Report. We've all
Useful
used this
tool.
in our leadership teams at a place we work together. And
Yeah.
I think we've each used it at different companies since then. I
Yeah,
certainly have
absolutely.
spoken to so many chiefs of staff about the Flash Report, and they've implemented the Flash Report at their companies to great success. So super excited for this topic. Ed, can you kick us off with like quick high-level definition and maybe the backstory of how we picked it or how you picked it for G2?
Sure. So the Flash Report is essentially compiling the key metrics, not more than 6 or 7 key metrics that cover the performance of the business for a short period of time. So we did ours weekly.
Good. Yep.
And then also a brief, and I had a brief narrative from each of the key business units of what was going on and what was critical. And the entire key to the Flash Report was I would receive it. So I asked for it from the team. I would receive it and could digest the critical elements before our weekly staff meeting. So I could see what needed to be covered, and I could do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then after the staff meeting, we may make a tweak or two, and then we distribute it to our private equity partners. And then they could see in 10 minutes or 15 minutes what was going on with the business. And then when I had my Friday, so that was normally on Wednesday, when I had my Friday call, we would be able to pin down off the same common set of data.
Yeah.
Here's kind of the key things that we need to be covering this week as far as business operations or performance.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so we used it as a leadership team in our leadership team meetings as kind of a starting point for our discussion. And the leadership team members were meant to read that beforehand. So it would be distributed, read it, scan it, get a gist of it. And then we weren't just like verbatim reading the Flash Report to each other. It was discussion points that needed to be discussed as a group, or, hey, I have a question for you on this. I saw this, or any handoffs or interdependencies and things like that. So as a participant in the leadership team meetings, I found it really useful to know a quick snapshot of what was happening around the business and then have a more fulsome, robust discussion.
Yeah, totally. I think this is such a useful tool for many businesses, but I think the most use that you can get out of a tool like this is for businesses where it's a culture of transparency. And I mean, I sort of came up in my executive journey through Ed. A lot of what I, kind of values I share today were from working for Ed, with Ed. And, it is about transparency. You're trying to have all of the, heads of the business march in the same direction, which aligns to a strategic plan, right? And so you're measuring things based on that. And it is a just real simple, effective, efficient way to have everybody get on the same page. And then you talk about not only internally, but with your external stakeholders, your board, your investors, whomever is really interested in kind of like the pulse of the business, what's going on there. It just saves a tremendous amount of time getting people up to speed in individual meetings every month, when they haven't had continuity with information flow. And this is just a really good way to break things down into concise metrics and commentary, qualitative, quantitative, if you will. And yeah, I mean, can't say enough about the usefulness of such a tool.
And as Ed mentioned, this is not a full debrief. Let's spend half a day to go through every single metric. It's a flash report.
That's your MBR typically. Yeah.
Yes. So this is just kind of getting people a pulse on the business. Yeah. And I mean, I've talked about this in a number of episodes and conversations where our PE group loved the flash report because Ed and us as a team introduced that to them. They loved it so much. They rolled that out to all of their portfolio companies. Like, everyone is doing a flash report. We want this from everybody. Yeah. So that's how useful it was for them. And I think you two have both mentioned separately, as CEO and CFO, the follow-up questions you got from them were more, not like better questions, but just more informed and closer to the pin. So you could get right to the crux of the
That's
issue.
key. Yeah, exactly that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, you spend so much time at board meetings sometimes, or, even in just all hands meetings, or even leadership meetings, like rehashing where you left off like a month or a quarter ago, which is just a waste of time. Honestly, we all have, time is so precious. So the less time you spend on that, the more time you spend, getting down on the issues that need to be discussed and decisions made. More importantly, you can do so with this sort of like, consistent, information set, if you will. So yeah, it's excellent.
And another benefit for me was it made me sit there for, 10, 15 minutes, go like, what did happen this week? Everything's flying around. And it's like, oh my gosh, let me look at my last entry in the flash report. Oh my gosh, so much has happened since then. Let me make sure to document that in the anecdotal section. And we'll show an example here in the second half of the pod. But Ed, you were kind of, this was off the Balanced Scorecard, which is the methodology we used at G2, which is the place we work together. But people now have OKRs and EOS and different types of metric gathering and reporting systems. Maybe just a quick backdrop on why you selected Balanced Scorecard and how that got us to the flash report.
Balanced Scorecard actually predates G2. So I actually implemented Balanced Scorecard when I became CEO of Beeline about 5 years prior to that. And did it because just needed a framework to be able to analyze business, make decisions. And whether it's Balanced Scorecard or whether it's OKRs or whether it's, anything that you can get, as long as there's a system, a framework that allows you to organize thoughts and organize information and be able to make intelligent decisions, that's kind of critical to the operation of a business. And so, it doesn't matter which one of those you choose, just choose one and then kind of focus on implementing that fully through the organization. The flash report then became our weekly, we pick one of the things with Balanced Scorecard is you pick just a few key components that you're going to measure that are really the drivers for your performance. And you do a lot of work ahead of time to analyze, what are my kind of key elements that drive the internal focus, which then drives customer focus, which then drives kind of the financial performance ultimately of the business. And so we would look at those various perspectives and come up with a couple key performance indicators at the department level, and then consolidate it for the company. And that's what we would report out. That would be kind of number one report out on the flash report would be, how are we doing with those particular initiatives around the Balanced Scorecard perspectives. And the second piece would be the ones that, any business, doesn't matter who it is or what your business is, needs to understand on a weekly basis. So what's our cash position? What are our sales? What's the pipeline look like? So really revenue driven metrics. And then, I've spent most of my career in services, tech-enabled services and technology, financial services businesses. So we'd have key indicators around headcount, because that was our largest expense. And then if it was assets, what the performance of those asset pools look like.
Yeah.
And we just report that out. And within 10 minutes, I would have a good picture of where we were at on all of those 8 or 10 key indicators of how the business was doing. And then a quick glance down at each of the initiatives around kind of strategic initiatives that we had, and then performance in each of the departments. It's a game changer, absolute game changer.
And I think you mentioned some specific industries you were in, but the flash report is industry agnostic. So it can be used for almost any industry, and you would change, obviously, the metrics that are most meaningful for you and most relevant for you and your team
Yeah.
to look at. And I think another thing that you hit on there, Ed, was backing up the flash report and inherent in the balanced scorecard methodology are those 4 perspectives, and they feed into one another. So the learning and development is where things started, and that led to internal process, second perspective, which then led to the third perspective, customer, which then ended with financial performance. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, that's different, because most people go spreadsheet, numbers, jam it down into the business and make this number happen on a spreadsheet. And the way the methodology and approach behind what we were doing, which you were espousing, was no. We start with the learning and development. We start with our people. They take care of our customers. Happy customers buy more things. And the natural end game or byproduct or result is financial success of the business.
Yep. Yeah.
Rory, you were in the CFO seat for this. So what were you looking at in terms of putting together?
I was looking, kind of longitudinally, if you will. What I remember, and it's funny, I'm working for a company now, and we also use the flash report. Our CEOs uses that as primary tool to communicate with our board on a weekly basis. And, we're an earlier stage business, so like the metrics we look at may be quite a bit different than even like a private equity stage business. So, earlier stage businesses, you're looking at, certain things around growth, liquidity, as you say, even people and kind of metrics around those things, operational. And in our case, we're a lender. So portfolio performance is everything. In a lending business, it's one thing to be good at, lending out money. You also got to be able to collect it. So we keep a very, close eye on those things. But that's different than maybe if you're working for a SaaS business, So my point here is, the framework of the flash report can be consistent across any business, but the specific metrics and elements that you go through could be very customized to a business. And I think, we've worked with other companies to help them develop the right kind of flash report for them in our consulting businesses. But, as a CFO, like I've often used it to look around at my peers, whether it's the CIO, CTO, whatever, COO, and kind of what's going on in their organizations, because I see things from the numbers framework. But, looking at the activity and the things there helps me understand even the drivers to why the numbers are what they are. I'd like to think that most of the time I have a good read on that anyway, but things come up, and as you said earlier, working for a fast-paced company, you're losing time, being able to look at what else is going on in the business and other business units. Super important. You can glean a lot from that and then kind of adjust course. I as a CFO, I use that to adjust my forecasts, my financial forecasts a lot.
Okay.
If you're seeing a lot more throughput, or if you're seeing a lot more, call it asset acquisition or CapEx or whatever, like that helps me understand what the future is going to look like based on activities that are happening today.
That's cool, because I love the flash report as chief of staff. So when we first used it at G2, I was not chief of staff, but later on, we used the flash report when I was chief of staff. And one of the things I liked about it is I would be having these individual conversations, executives. They're like, why is this happening? Like, why isn't he doing this? Like, this just makes no sense to me. And then on the other side of things, someone over here is going, why does she just do this? That would make my life so much easier. What the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And having the flash report as a discussion for our weekly leadership meetings, which I took point on, it was this discussion where like, oh, I have context now. I understand. I might not agree with it, but I understand now. And it was also a way to say, hey, as a leadership team, and that was a phrase that Ed, you and I used to kind of snap people out of, you're not your functional head anymore. You're part of the leadership team. You're a leadership team member, and you're on two teams almost, your functional team and leadership team. For what's best for us as a group, like where do we go from here? What's the best next step for the leadership team? So I really liked the flash report because it just lent itself so well to having that type of discussion, which I think is key for having a really robust, lively, engaged, informed leadership team. So I love that.
Yeah, it forces teams, even with the best intentions and the most well-rounded leaders, to not be in silos. You can't if you're running that kind of a program. Right. And as you said, like, everyone's in their lane trying to execute on their own metrics, but someone like you can look across the business and have some way of helping solve a problem in technology or in operations or whatever it may be, just by knowing what else is going on. What are people doing? What are people not doing more?
Yeah.
What's happening from the customers, right? So yeah, I just like it because it's basically it's a foundation. It's a touch point, that's consistent and it's metrics driven.
Yeah. Ed, what kind of questions would you get from the board or PE group off the flash report?
Well, let me take a step back and actually add to what you just said, Emily, because I think it's really important. The flash report is the methodology by which you ensure that the executive team is pulling the same direction as it pertains to the strategic plan.
Yeah.
So the two, you kind of have, I could put a flash report together for any business and go, well, you're going to want to measure cash and a couple of these other drivers. But the most effective flash reports are ones that are designed around the business's strategic plan. Yeah. And that strategic plan, like I said, pick a framework, doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But that flash report becomes the cadence, the tempo, the communications of we're all pulling the same direction. Here's knowing that we're making progress because you're seeing it quantitatively and qualitatively on a flash report. It answers a bunch of those questions like, well, why is X, Y, and Z doing what they're doing? Well, because this is a strategic plan and everybody kind of knows what it is. And it provides a communications framework for everybody to go, okay, we've got a common communications methodology in a flash report. I can see what's going on. I know we're pointing toward the strategic, it's pointing toward the strategic objectives, strategic goals, and I can see our progress or where there's not progress. Because again, as you noted, the leadership team is responsible for strategic execution collectively. Yeah. And then they've got their specialty areas. And that's a lot of the questions I would have from the private equity guys. Once at G2, we kind of had to train the private equity guys on the Balanced Scorecard and on the flash report. And again, as you noted, once the light bulb went off, this became we're doing this. But with the flash report piece, it really did become one of those, the private equity guys would go, okay, we understand based upon our quarterly board meetings, what your strategic initiatives are for this quarter. And so they would ask questions because I would tell folks, don't sugarcoat if we've got an issue, put issues in here. And a lot of them would be tech enabled. And they'd be like, do you need additional resources? Do we have the right folks? Do we need a contractor? Is this going to delay a product launch? And the other thing that they would look at, because it's private equity and we're driving toward cash debt compliance for covenants and growth, was what's in the pipeline and what's the probability of close. And so we'd spend a lot of time going, okay, we'd be getting our reporting out of the CRM, whether it was Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. Those were the two that we've used. Yeah. And we'd go, okay, what's the pipeline look like? And we talk through, okay, what does the pipeline look like and how is that playing to the strategic plan? And sometimes we'd have people issues. Those would be in there as well. So it would tend to be strategy issues first, would be their questions because it was structured around the strategy and we get buy-in on the strategy every quarter and what we expected to accomplish that quarter. The second would be pipeline and sales. How are we growing and how are we going? And then the third would be any people issues that were identified in there, whether that was resource needs or whether that was people leaving or because we would report that, or whether that was, I've got a performance issue in a particular area that might be reported out by one of the executives there. And again, our private equity folks are great partners. And so they would, ask key questions to make sure we were kind of making some of the right decisions, or I was making the right decision as the chief executive.
And I remember you going, no surprises, good or bad, no surprises. There should be no surprises for the board at board meetings. There should be no surprises. Tell me, tell the group what's happening, good or bad, ugly, just get it out there, which was comforting and relieving.
Our CEO at my business that I work at, he's a great CEO, and he's taken a, kind of a spin on the flash report and kind of boiled some things down to good, bad, ugly, right? Like every business has all of those things. You want things to be more good than anything, but you got to deal with all of it. So yeah, I think it's a good way to communicate everything that's salient. And you then end up spending the time going through more decision-making, more thoughtful planning than kind of like spending your meeting time, like going through what did you do last summer, or quarter, or week, or whatever. It's so much more of a stimulus for actually making shit happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as chief of staff, one thing I would try to facilitate, but also look for is when the leadership team, when one member would say, we didn't meet our goal here. Here's why. I know why. And this is bad news. And I'm sharing it with the group. And other people wouldn't, beat this person over the head, or they'd be like, okay, well, how do we help you fix that? Or here's an idea. Or like, here's also the reason why my team didn't hand this off to you properly, all that stuff. It was bad news, but I would look for these little responses from people. And that would tell me the health of the leadership team. That was an aspect of leadership team health.
Right. And stuff that like is maybe not trending in the right direction. You see those shoots come up early rather than if you work in silos and you don't have regular information flow, somebody's going to try to bury that until they can't anymore. And then it becomes a real problem.
And it can bury it. It's easy to bury it when you're not having discussions around this.
Yeah.
So this gets it out in the open.
Right.
Yeah. I just believe so much in the leadership culture of transparency, and this is just the right tool for,
Yeah. All right. Should we show folks? Let's do a little share screen. Let's do.
Yeah. Bust it out.
Show and
A
tell.
little show and tell.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do like the blank template just to get people used to it. And then we have an example template we'll go through.
Certainly. Yeah.
But this is just on a good old spreadsheet. I've seen full flash reports that are,
oh gosh. Yeah.
like a ship. They're in the shape of a ship, and each of the sails is like a perspective. And I'm like, that is awesome. But you can
it's function over form, but there's some really, a lot of people use like Power BI and other things like that, where you can really make it pretty sophisticated with all sorts of other bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, good old Excel is still what the whole economy is built on, basically. So
there's two main sections of the flash report. The top section captures the handful of KPIs for each perspective. And then there's the second part, which are kind of the, in your own words, key executives, C-suite executives, leadership team, whatever that is for your company. Tell us what has happened in your respective department in a few sentences, just in your own words, in a few bullet points. What happened? What's the most relevant information? What do you guys want people to know about this top section? So for folks listening, we have 4 different sections that correspond with a perspective. So learning and development, internal process, customer, and finance.
Yeah.
And
agree. Just kind of what Ed said earlier, it aligns ultimately to a strategic plan, which then typically aligns to an operating plan for a period, whether that's the current year or maybe a 3-year plan or something like that. And so then in this format, you're going to be pulling the key metrics that underpin those, and you're going to measure them, and you're going to quantify them up in this top section. The top section is quantitative, basically.
Let me pull up the actual example here. So
there you go. Exactly.
This has a lot of financial metrics, but
so
you can see here's the plan. Like literally there's a column that's like, here's what we're trying to hit. Here's the target. One quick thing though, I think there's the flash report, putting that together, reporting out on it, having discussions, but almost separate from that and prior to that, we did have discussions on literally what is our mission statement? What's our vision for the company as a whole? And then for this next year, what are we going to break it down by quarter? So everyone knew the big picture context, but I just want to get that out there for listeners who are like, wait a minute, When are they building this flash report to? There were separate conversations in a series of workshops that went to that.
Mm.
All right. Ed or Rory, walk us
Yeah,
through.
this particular, I was going to say, this particular flash report is actually a sanitized version from one of the companies that I've been working with. So, essentially, you've got the elements that you had noted, Emily, where you've got, again, financial tends to dominate. It's if you think about your strategic plan, financial is the ultimate outcome
Exactly.
of your other perspectives, and so in one sense, you're like, this isn't driving the train. It's actually where the train is going. And so this is really, how are you performing? So you do tend to see a lot, and candidly, the metrics around finance tend to be easier to measure, easier to manage, maybe not manage, but easier to measure and easier to see.
Certainly.
But that's ultimately what you're looking to do, is are we performing financially? The other three perspectives drive into each other to that financial performance in a balanced scorecard world.
Mm-hmm.
And so in each one of those, this is almost, I would say, this is as much as you would ever want to put in a flash report, because you have really here about 20 different metrics. And I like to try and reduce it down even further to maybe 10 or 12. But again, your key drivers, and when you look at these components, the customer, the internal, and then learning and development, or people and tools is how I tended to use it, resources, internal resources. We would look at those elements and go, okay, are we? And you can see that it's longitudinal here, and Rory and I like to use that word because it's long, and it's got attitude in it, so it's longitudinal, which basically means you're looking at it period over period over period and trying to analyze a trend. So you're going, okay, is this kind of bouncing around where we expect it to, or is it trending up or trending down? And are we going toward our plan or away from our plan? And so when I do a flash report, I would tend to have a longitudinal analysis where I can go, okay, am I going the right direction or not? And and if we're seeing significant changes, especially in these three perspectives that you've got up on the screen, that's going to eventually be driving my financial performance in 6 days or 6 months. And this piece here with these the three perspectives and these KPIs tend to be what your levers are to pull for your financial performance. And if they're not all tied together, then that is where you tend to have a problem.
Exactly.
And just for folks listening, so for an example, within the learning and development perspective, we have 3 items here, things like training completion rate, sales academy participation, and F&I certification completion. This, again, can be customized to your business. But those are the 3 items. And then we have, February, we have January, February, and the actual outcomes there. And then we have the projected year to date for all of 2025, or for whatever year you're in. So we're measuring the actuals against the forecasts.
Yeah, in this case, it's great because you get the both variance of your current performance against the plan. You have the trend relative to prior period, and then you have the forward looking view and how that shakes out based on those trends and how you perform. So you really can get kind of the full picture with just, as you see here, about 6 or 7 columns of information, several metrics in the rows. I mean, it's really a powerful tool. And then, the financial side, I mean, every business is different. A manufacturing business is going to be much different than, say, tech-enabled services business. But, you're generally looking at kind of top line, sort of revenue, sales metrics. That's what's going to drive your business. You look at your OPEX and CAPEX. So somewhere around those 3 things, you should be able to see the whole story based on the rest of the business and how it's trending out. Yeah.
And I remember at G2, we stood this thing up from scratch. And so a big portion of our discussion was what goes on the Balanced Scorecard, but also what goes on the flash report. And that was a group discussion. It wasn't just, oh, you're the head of this department, therefore you come up with whatever you think is best. It was, again, us as a leadership team going, what do we really think best represents if we're headed in the right direction for this perspective? What are some leading indicators? What are some lagging indicators? How do we best capture this, again, in a snapshot, in a flash report? And we would have discussions and rounds of back and forth on this, and anyone could participate and would be expected to participate.
Encouraged to, yeah,
Yes.
expected, yeah.
But maybe, like, what are you guys' thoughts on what should make it onto a flash report? Because not everything can be on here.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that time you'll have done the vetting of that when you kind of create your balanced scorecard, metrics or, call it, the key things you're tracking for your business. This is just derivative of that. So a lot of times you'll have done that work already and you're just pulling into this particular report, which is a little slightly different view. But, I think one element that is, I believe to be true, is you should always be evaluating whether the metrics you're highlighting are what matter, and that may change over time. So, management teams shouldn't be afraid to make changes, especially if they're starting from scratch. You're going to stumble around a little bit before you find your footing on measuring your business if you've never done it before and your team's maybe not used to it. So, be open to, kind of amending things, but just really focus on truly understanding what drives your business,
The best practice is to do what you just said, Emily, which is, you've got a balanced scorecard or some others. And again, we've used that because the three of us have been immersed in it, but basically any strategic framework. And you've kind of worked through this thing and beat it up and gone back and forth as a group and, got consensus on the drivers and are measuring that. That's the best method. The second best method is what Rory just said: do something. Measure something. You got an idea, and then if it's wrong, adjust what you're measuring. But the worst thing is to do nothing because you're trying to figure out what, I don't have a strategic thing, and and they telling me to do a strategic thing, and it's going to take 9 months to do that. So best thing is to have that. Second best thing is to have something, and the worst thing is to kind of spin around and overanalyze, trying to get to something that's going to give you a picture of how your business is performing on a regular basis. That's more frequently than my monthly close.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is I remember, so I don't remember the specific, but one of my metrics or goals was determining what the proper metric should be. So that was like my very first one in one category. I forget exactly what it was, but it was, Emily, you got to come up with what metric is most accurate. So like dig into the data and figure out what actually is most correlated with this thing we're trying to measure from your group. Another one, my initial one, was to get a baseline set of data. And I was running client management at the time. And we wanted a baseline set of data around, I forget what, and it was like, okay, for this quarter, my job was to show progress on creating a baseline of data. And that was, are you 85% done? Are you 90% done? How close are you? But that was the first one for me. Rory, do you remember any of your kind of thematic or specific ones you had on your flash report?
Yeah, well, for us, we were so focused on top line growth in that business. And so a lot of what, our metrics were highlighting was bookings and kind of revenue, cycle times to revenue from bookings, things like that, what drove our business, which was a very profitable business, was, as much acceleration on top line as you can get. So, in the few metrics we have, it was much more geared around that. So I partnered a lot with the sales team, on those types of things, and had a CRM to pull information from. So a lot of businesses have that information at your fingertips, which is great. And so, I'd say that was kind of the bulk of it. Now, again, different business, my business today, it's similarly around growth, but it's also around sort of liquidity measures and sort of capital related things that, for an early stage business, that's super important. If you're totally funded and you're not worried about sort of liquidity, you're going to probably not use up a lot of real estate on this report with that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah.
Just again, depends on the focus. And if you're a growth stage private equity backed company, that's where you're going to see a lot of the focus areas, whether it's subscription revenue or recurring revenue, or, churn is a huge one too. We track churn very closely. Those are, you just have to know what drives your business in particular and then measure around that.
Yeah. And one thing we did too, is there were like separate there's 2 series of meetings. One was for like the flash report rollout,
Yeah.
where you actually go through the information on it. And there was a separate meeting series that was how is this process working? So do we need to change anything in the flash report? Not like the information contained in the flash
Yeah.
report, but the mechanics of like running the flash report itself, which I remember 2 of our teammates were very confused about. They would always ask me, Emily, do I say this thing in this meeting or that thing in this meeting? And but it was the actual standing up of the process and checking in on, can you pull data easily? And are we measuring the right things and all these different pieces? But that's another way to do it, where you separate the actual report out of the contents of the flash report and then how the structure and mechanics of the thing are working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like any other application that requires maintenance, right? Is you got to, okay, you've got something running, but is it running the right way? Is it, performing as you need it to perform? And I think, this is where I think like having a chief of staff or a resource like that is sort of like cross-functional can like drive something big time.
Yeah. I mean, when I was chief of staff, Ed and I worked so closely, but standing up the thing for the first time and figuring out what's our source of data for this? Is it a manual pull to start? Can we automate that? Is it accurate? Ooh, and another big one is this data segment that we're reporting out over in this side of the flash report, do those numbers match with this other subset of data that we're reporting out in this part of the flash report? Because if they don't, believe you me, we will get questions on that.
Yes, garbage in, garbage out still is a thing on one of these. So you have to make sure that the data that you're working with is, legitimate and accurate and all that stuff. So
and sometimes they are legitimately different, but you have to be able to explain why. And Rory, I'm going to call you out in a good way here.
Okay.
You were present for my very first board meeting. I apologize again for how much I sweated in that meeting. But you said, Emily, because I was doing rounds and rounds of prep because I was over analyzing and over preparing and everything and freaking out.
And that's you. Yeah.
And one of the best things you've ever said to me is, Emily, don't just say the number on the screen. Explain the story behind the number. Explain like why that number is there, even if it's a bad number. I was like, okay. So I literally went through every single number and data point that I had on my slides and was like, wrote down a story behind them, which was fine for what I was doing at the time, the stage I was at. But I would encourage people, maybe not to that level, but I would encourage people in that sentiment to know what's behind the numbers. And to be able to explain and not just recite in a rote manner.
I had my own comeuppance when I first started talking to the board and this type of thing. I mean, I was always knew the numbers, but it was like the context behind the numbers is what matters. And I mean, that was probably my biggest learning curve myself. And I was a numbers guy, is to be able to like synthesize that and, provide some novel insight from that, is not obvious, and I'd say I had that conversation with the person on my staff yesterday. Is like, we go through a monthly business review on financial metrics. I'm like, see, you already knows the numbers. You've shared the P&L and tell the story behind it, so probably Ed taught me, and maybe I shared that with you, and
circle of life, Simbas. Yeah. Well, I remember we were at a board meeting, and it was like this one board member. We all know him, but he was like, "I can read," and he said it like that. It was like, "Oh shit, okay." Like he can read the slide. Stop just reciting the numbers.
Well, I kind of got the sort of beat down proverbially from our actual private equity partner. Like he's like, this guy needs to like learn how to speak to a board, basically. He obviously knows the numbers, but there's no difference between what he's doing here as a financial analyst and a CFO. He needs to step it up. So, that's the kind of motivated thing I needed to hear. And, then I spent so much more of my time, as you just talked about for yourself, is like understanding the why behind it rather than just like, basically reciting the numbers. And it's like, no shit, you already sent out the report. They already seen it. They want to know why.
I always remember that.
And why and what does it mean? Those are the two things.
What does it mean? What am I doing about it? So Ed, we have this example on the screen here. So for people on YouTube, this is a sanitized version of one of your companies you've been involved with. Can you just walk people through maybe just some key elements of each of the perspectives here and kind of why you chose those ones and how they feed into each other?
So let me caveat this by saying I can't read it because it's
Oh,
tiny.
do you want me to make it?
So I'm going to have to put my glasses on and get close to the screen.
Let me make this bigger for
Um,
you and people watching. Can you see this any better?
Oh, good. Yes, that's better. Okay. So we'll start with the people and tools section or learning and development section. Relatively small company, and so one of the key components, and it's a relatively esoteric business. So one of the key components for us for success was to have people not only learn the business, which is really where you've got the sales academy and the training completion, and F&I completion, certification completion. It was really, can we get everybody trained? Can we get our key stakeholders externally trained, so that they better understand the business? Because again, if they understand the business from a fundamentals perspective, that's going to go a long way, both product and business fundamentals. It's going to go a long way to us being successful. So that's why we chose those. And then we kind of split it up based upon hiring plan, a number of folks we expected to be able to throughput on a given month as to what our targets were going to be. Same thing, if you look at the internal processes, a lot of what we did was tech-enabled processing of various things, whether that was, and Rory and I, coming out of Beeline, you have proof of claims, where you were filing proofs of claim for bankruptcies. So this happens to be a insurance administrator. So you've got, when someone files a claim, you want to pay that claim timely. And so are we hitting our timelines? Are we making sure that when we get a contract or policy in, that the contract or policy is activated fast in case there's a quick claim? We don't have it, you're not in my system type of thing.
Right.
And then, how much of that is automated versus how much of that is manual, with a goal to really drive automation through the business, not because, one, for scalability, but two, for accuracy. And, what we found was the more people touch a process, the more likelihood you're going to get variation in the process and then inconsistency in performance. And so we wanted to automate as much as we could. And so that's really where the internal processes came from. And within each one of those, there's a bunch of other things that, here's the why they're there, kind of going to the discussion we just had. But they're also driving a bunch of other metrics that aren't shown here, but are critically important, especially when it comes to the customer,
Yep.
which gets us here, which is the Net Promoter Score. Essentially, what do our customers think of us? And again, if you're in a business that's kind of customer facing and you're expected to have a high level of service, and where that in particular in this type of business, if you've ever dealt with a health insurance company, you know what it's like when you've got a claims problem. If we can exceed expectations and do really well, we're going to be able to grow that business. So we knew that, hey, this is going to drive our financial performance because most people suck at this. And so if we can be really good at this, as measured by Net Promoter Score, which is a concept that essentially says, if you rate 8, 9, or 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, when you say, would you recommend us to a friend, would you recommend our services? If they rate you an 8, 9, or 10, that's a plus. And then kind of anything else is going to be a minus, and you want to add your pluses and your minuses to get your net. And so that's what we were looking at. New dealer, new agent enrollments became are we growing, from a standpoint of growing the base of the distribution base, and then the average time to close a ticket. So again, this is being tech enabled. Part of our customers were utilizing our technology to process at their locations, whether that's doctor's offices or what have you. And so as a result, we wanted to make sure that if they submitted a ticket, then they were having problems, and we were able to get that resolved, because if we couldn't, then they were going to be unhappy. And if they're unhappy, it impacts our financial performance. Mm-hmm. Again, as Rory noted, this business was kind of early stage, kind of a restart.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, we have to have a certain number of policies sold or serviced on a regular basis. And so what does that break even count, which comes off of our budget, our plan? What's our average sales price? What's our net sales price? And there's a cost of goods factor that allows us to determine what our sales pricing or what our sales pacing is. So the sales pacing is how much we expect to sell that month.
Yeah.
And we had this business has a subsidiary in Mexico. So we measured US versus Mexico. The pricing could be a little bit different as well. We looked at that on the backside, but again, you don't want to have so many variables in here that it gets confusing. So we said, okay, what's the critical piece? How's the US doing? How's Mexico doing? Are we short or over our break even? If we're behind our break even, that means we're going to have a net loss.
Yeah.
So what's our net loss? Then we have EBITDA, which is essentially takes out the non-cash pieces. So we say, okay, what's our EBITDA? Then we go, what's our cash for both, US and this has Europe in it. So what's our cash for US and Europe and US dollars? What's our long-term debt balance and line of credit balance? And then what's our burn rate?
Yep.
So on a monthly basis, what are we burning? And then kind of the bottom, how many months of runway do we have? And, and if we had investments, we had an investment balance sitting out there, or you could use line of credit, max, or you can, any one of those things. But we basically said, if we burn through our cash, how much runway do we have? 2.5 months. If we utilize our line of credit fully and pull in all of our investments, what's our runway? A year, a month and a half. So we got a little over a year of runway to get this thing flip the cash flow positive, or we're going to need to do a capital call. And we would be able to look at this and go, okay, what did we expect it to be at the end of the year? And where are we at today? And are we improving or not improving? And again, this is a growth business. So there's an anticipated burn rate. That's a feature, not a bug in this particular case, but we knew that we also were going to have to rely on additional investment from the private equity sponsor in order to be able to get ourselves, this growth rate. Otherwise, we would have to pull back and manage to that months of runway. So that's what drove this particular set. But every business is going to have its own kind of unique. A lot of the stuff at the top is going to be somewhat similar for almost any business, and that you're measuring cash and cash burn rate and EBITDA and those kind of things and sales trends. But the stuff at the bottom is really what's driving these numbers. And that's what we would look to manage on a regular basis. So whether that was, performance, et cetera. And then Emily's just kind of moved it for those folks who can't see this, has moved the flash report down to initiative updates. So we had 3 initiatives, a tech roadmap, where we were having certain technology developed internally and deployed, the financial performance, and then M&A and strategic partnerships. And these are like no more than 2 or 3 sentences of here's where we're at.
Yeah.
And I'll give the example on the tech roadmap. Platform upgrade V2 in QA. It's expected to deploy in Q3. So it's quick hits so that whoever's looking at this you kind of go, okay, we've got a problem. There's a AI chatbot implementation. It was delayed because there were hallucinations on it. So it's been pushed out 2 weeks to try and improve the model associated with the AI chatbot. So that's where, as Rory had noted, it could be good, bad, or ugly. This isn't ugly because we're trying to automate all this stuff and it's bad. And, we roll something and it's, the thing starts telling you to, mail in your toothbrush along with your dental impressions to get your dentist bill paid. Not a good, not a good answer from the chatbot. So you have to pull it down and fix it. But, and that was supposed to go live and there's an expectation of savings, or at least facilitating growth that, isn't going to be realized. It's a relatively short issue. And that's what we would do. And then the next section would be kind of key department updates. And, it's got sales and customer service and marketing and, production operations, overseas. So each of the C-level or VP level folks would put something in here. And so like our marketing vice president, for instance, had, planning underway for APAC, Asia Pacific. So the APAC summit, and then expecting 5,200 attendees, websites being rescoped for the company. 3 competing firms are looking at doing that work. That's it, done. It's relatively short, snappy. Here's what's going on. And then we may get a question from our private equity sponsor that would say, look, if you're expecting 5,200 attendees, should we attend? Are there going to be folks that are in your client base that maybe we should be talking to? Or the website is being scoped, and you got three competing firms looking at it. What are you getting as early indications as a cost? Is it, $10,000, $150,000? Because that's going to impact some of the projections that they may have for a capital call based upon burn rate above. So that would be the type of questions we would deal with. And but again, you can get through this entire flash report and pull out the key pieces for questions, decision-making, or issues to discuss at the staff meeting in 15 minutes.
Yeah, that was really helpful. I think our listeners will find that really beneficial. And if you are listening to this, I would encourage you to check out the YouTube version where there's a video. Also, the show notes will have links to the template and the example that we just went through. But Ed was talking through as I was scrolling through the key sections of the flash report. So you got a preview or a sneak peek of how those are put together. What else is important for people to know about the flash report?
I just think it's you should, great leadership teams should implement something like this, and like I said earlier, you got to crawl before you walk. It's not gonna start out perfect. You're gonna have to get people to buy in terms of, especially if they're not used to doing this kind of reporting or having these types of discussions on a regular basis, but got to get over that growing pain and make it happen, because it's so useful, saves so much time, is such an easy way to communicate clearly, both upwards to your board and your ownership, but also sideways to your colleagues. It's how you solve business problems, is with information.
And on that, I would say this replaced all of our other reporting. So people kind of did their siloed reporting, or maybe they handed off one piece of data to another team, but this became the source of truth. And everyone in our company knew what the flash report was. Even mid-management, rank and file folks, up to our senior board members, everyone knew what the flash report was and how it worked. And I think that was a positive, and one of the benefits of everyone kind of knows what this thing is, and they know their part in it as well.
Yeah, I would say that the last thing, which is, I don't want to say is counter to what Rory just said, it actually reinforces it, is don't make the flash report so difficult to compile, so complex, or overthink it to the point where you have to hire an FTE to do the flash report.
No.
The flash report should actually be, again, the bulk of the numbers piece, I tended to assign to either the chief of staff or to the chief financial officer's team or the accounting team to pull in. But it should be coming off of reporting that's already in the can.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't take you a day to put together a flash report. The flash report should take an hour or two to put together. Mm-hmm. And the individual VPs or managers that are putting their components in shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or 15 minutes to, like you said, Emily, it's a forcing function to go, what have we done this week? What issues are there that we need to put on the table? And then just write that down and don't overthink it and get it out.
Yeah.
I have seen some organizations where we introduced a flash report, or where I've introduced the concept of a flash report, and pretty soon they've turned it into like a monthly reporting package on a weekly basis instead. And it's just overcomplicated. It turns into a Rube Goldberg machine, and you just can't do that. It's got to be simple, easy to put together, quick to put together, quick to read, quick to digest, and quick to action.
And I think this is, for chiefs of staff listening, this is bread and butter chief of staff initiative. And this was an ongoing initiative that I was on point for. So there's the initial stand up and introduction of the flash report to the leadership team. And then there's a second phase where you actually, how do you pull the data, deciding what's going to go in it, and then the ongoing, cadence of the flash report outs. And sometimes if a leader is brand new to it, they've never done it before, it'll take months to get them in a regular cadence where they feel comfortable.
True.
The other story I want to throw in here is I was going back and forth with a board member on the second part of the flash report, which is the little sentences in people's own words. And I'm like, hey, what are you trying to hear? Is there a format you want? And the person I was talking to was, Emily, I like it when it's in their own words. I don't mind that it's in different formats and people have bullet points, or this person has choppy sentences, or this person does it this way. I know these people, I can actually hear them saying it, and I like hearing it in their own words. And I always remembered that. So I just wanted to throw that out for folks as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. Awesome. I think we've
This might have
covered
been
a
our
lot.
longest pod yet, I think, actually.
I think it's worth it though. Flash report is game changer.
Yeah.
Game changer.
It's important stuff.
So listen to this again, go watch it on YouTube. And then in the show notes, we will have the link to that Blake template that you can use if you want and customize it yourself. And then also the example we just went through to have side by side as well. But
And reach out to any one of us individually. I think probably
Please,
find a way to get in touch with us. Happy to shed more light on it. So
yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Rory. Thanks, Ed.
until next time, team. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, Rory.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.